Welcome everyone to the last in the Michaelmas term portion of the series of inReach virtual seminar series. It's been a really interesting collection of speakers who come from all different walks of life, and this is perhaps what makes this seminar series so important and interesting to me, and hopefully to many of you. And that is that we're thinking with questions of lived experience and lived expertise, as well as the more traditional academic approaches to knowledge making. And with that, it's my absolute honor to introduce you to our speaker today, Ghassan Hage, who is Professor of Anthropology and Social Theory at the University of Melbourne in Australia, and also a Senior Research Fellow at the Max Planck Institute of Social Anthropology in Halle, Germany. He is internationally known for his research on migration, on the intersection of racism, nationalism, and colonialism, and for his development of critical anthropological theory. This year, he republished some of his seminal works in the racial politics of Australian multiculturalism, including the very well-known White Nation and Against Paranoid Nationalism, but also some newer works as well included in that volume. His sole authored books include Alter Politics, Critical Anthropology, and the Radical Imagination, Is Racism an Environmental Threat?, and Diasporic Culture, Ethnographic Explorations of the Lebanese in the World. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our guest speaker, Ghassan Hage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you about this topic and seeing whether it activates your own imagination as much as it has activated mine. So we're dealing today sort of like with the concept of negotiated being, and let me kind of like quickly differentiate a little bit between a more, if you like, common sense meaning of negotiation and negotiated being, as I will be talking about it here. I think there is some intersection between the two, but they are at the same time quite distinct. So negotiation, as most of us know it, is when we have to negotiate with others. So we sit at the table formally or informally. We have problems and we wish to settle a difference in opinion, or we want to settle a difference, sometimes not so much of opinion, but maybe we've had a fight, and we sit at the table. I have my interest, you have your interest, and we're going to negotiate a deal, negotiate a settlement, etc. So this is very, well, I think it's maybe not very, because negotiation in the way I have just described it involves also some mode of being in a mode that we will call negotiated being. If you like to say it's negotiation, as I described it, to negotiate with someone. Negotiated being is negotiating someone. In a way, we don't say, I'm negotiating with the crowd. Is that I'm moving in the crowd, and I say, I'm negotiating the crowd. I'm negotiating, maybe I'm on a canoe, and I'm negotiating the river. So negotiating otherness and negotiating with otherness are sort of like the main difference to center on, to try and think about this thing called negotiated being. Negotiated being is a mode of existence. So it's a mode of being in the world. So it's not something you do just to arrive at a result of settlement, etc., resolving a conflict. It's a mode of continuously existing in the world. And as we will be talking about it, it actually is not a major dominant mode of existence, but it is a mode of existence. And as soon as we start talking about it, I'm sure, as I'm talking about it now, people can immediately recognize it as something they do in life, negotiated being. Negotiated being means you move, you might confront, there might be friction, so it's not some kind of idealized peace, happy thing. There's frictions, there's thumping each other, but there's also avoiding, there's ducking, there's there's all kind of adjusting, evading, dodging. I can think of a number of verbs and adjectives that reflect this mode of being. But as with what I just have talked about in terms of, if I'm talking about negotiating the river, it doesn't simply mean that I have to avoid something or etc. But I can also use the river. Negotiating the river means using sometimes, as I'm canoeing, I use this current to go somewhere, sort of like I take hop on it, so to speak. And so there are some advantages, but you notice in a way that in a kind of like negotiated being, you use, but you don't diminish, because you don't necessarily, as a dominant mode of existence, you have to coexist with what you are negotiating. So negotiating otherness is a kind of like mode of coexisting with otherness, but it involves quite a certain, if you like, attention to otherness. You are in the crowd, you are in a space, and you are engaged in negotiating being. You have to develop a certain sort of like intense, you have to intensify your awareness of your surrounding. One of the first times I started thinking about negotiated being, I was visiting professor in Harvard, and I joined this group called minimum impact hiking, and minimum impact hiking involved hiking, but as you are hiking, you are sort of like developing a certain capacity to be hyper aware of your impact. Even touching a branch, making sure you're putting your foot where the person in front of you has put their foot, to minimize the impact of treading on the soil, etc. Now, all of this kind of like is a certain sensitivity towards your surrounding, etc. Now, of course, this kind of mode of existence is not perceived as how you can make a living, so to speak, sort of like, it stands slightly in opposition to certain forms, dominant forms of existence, where you have extraction, domination, and it would be fair to say that it would be pretty impossible to exist simply by negotiated being. That is, it's not necessarily the idea is to provide an alternative mode of life, thinking domination is bad, negotiated being is good, but rather think to what extent certain forms of life straitjacket our mind and our existence, and to what extent anthropology can bring out certain different modes of existence, which weaken that straitjacketing and open imagination towards some other possibilities that the straitjacketing would not allow. I think in the face of the ecological crisis and many other crises that we are facing in the world, sort of like weakening certain forms of thinking that straitjacket our imagination is a good thing, because it allows us to think differently. And it doesn't mean that we have to think oppositionally, as in what we come up with has to be an alternative to what exists, but simply it can be a way of widening our capacity to create change, or if we are thinking of change, opening our imagination to new possibilities. So it is in this sense that we do some field work to open up new ways of being, new ways of thinking, and sometimes we do the field work in spaces where we think, wow, everybody here, you know, like let's say, I'll be talking a bit more about gift exchange, but we go to study societies where gift exchange is dominant. But when we finish our study, it allows us, it gives us the capacity to perceive that gift exchange is actually quite prevalent among us as well. So doing a study in one place gives us the sensitivity to actually uncover, if you like, minor, what we call, I would call minor modes of existence. But these minor modes of existence are minor modes of existence that prevail among us as well. So it just allows us to bring them out. So in this sense, I want to start a little bit by how I started more specifically thinking through the implication of negotiated being and what it actually means, and how it gave me the sensitivity to start seeing negotiated being outside of the space where I was doing my ethnography. And so the first place I want to talk about where I started thinking more systematically negotiated being is actually kind of like, it's not on an island or among some kind of like very exotic population. It's actually in the city of Beirut, where I was doing my ethnography on migration, Lebanese migration around the world. And at one point, I ended up linking myself with a number of middle-class, quite cosmopolitan Lebanese people who kind of like visit Beirut to enjoy the fact that in Beirut, laws are lax. You can smoke, you can speed, minor things like this. And so these people usually come from societies where the law is perceived as a bit oppressive, sort of like, so whether it's in Europe or in the United States or in Australia, and kind of like, they say, wow, you know, we love just being here and just being able to live a little bit outside the law. And this is one of the main sort of like spaces where negotiated being started emerging. That the idea is that negotiated being is a being which is outside the law. It's how you coexist with otherness outside the law. What do we mean by outside the law? Not as outlaws, but maybe as well, but outside the law, in the sense that let's take what it means to exist inside the law. Usually inside the law, the first thing means that whenever you're having a relation with someone, the law is always present. It's the sort of like, you have to, if you have sort of like, you know, sort of like, you know, just a minor thing. You're driving, and the law says this is a one-way street, and sort of like if you take this one-way street against the law, the person coming in the opposite direction will say to you, don't you know the law? If they're just nice and don't want to scream at you. But the point is the law will be present in the interaction as a third party which regulates your relation with others. The law, I think it has been wonderfully analyzed by sort of like in sort of like studies of civilization, how the law actually basically pacifies you. It takes away from you your capacity to be violent. It takes away your violence from you, and the state monopolizes violence, a la Max Weber, and this is the kind of like civilizational process, a la Norbert Elias, sort of like, you know, you have an accident, you come out, you take the insurance form, you say, blah, 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 the law will deal with us. The law is omnipresent, the law pacifies you. But the law also abstracts you. That's the idea of we are all equal before the law, which means not that we are the same, but there is an element in which the law bulldozes difference by creating abstract citizens. In the eye of the law, we are abstract subjects, citizens, etc. It's supposed to be that it doesn't matter what color we are, what how tall we are, what gender we are, what's our sexuality. The law is the law. It abstracts you from certain things. Now, what's interesting in spaces like Beirut is that people, let's say driving, they drive outside the law. That is, the police is not there all the time, hardly ever. And if people want to go up a one-way street, they will go up against the sign in a one-way street. Now, what's interesting is that in most cases in Lebanon, if you're in Beirut, if you are sort of like, if you're going in a one-way street and you find a car coming your way, driving against the traffic, you never say, oh my God, you're breaking the law. I mean, it just doesn't mean anything. However, something quite interesting. The person breaking the law, coming the opposite way, to actually know how not to create friction. That is, if they are totally stupid, mindless, and they're just driving and they don't care who's coming with it, you get upset with them, but you don't get upset with them because they're breaking the law. You get upset with them because they don't know how to break the law. A negotiated being is knowing how to break the law. It's knowing that, okay, I'm going to go up this street. It's a one-way street, but I'm going to think, how am I going to cause less friction? I'm going to make sure I'll come here. There's a parking space here. I will drive and come here to let the car come. Then I go, etc. So I have to have a certain fluid capacity of being sensitive to possibilities and not creating deadlocks. That is negotiated being. And so in negotiated being, something quite interesting happens, because first of all, unlike inside the law, people keep their violence, their capacity for violence. So if friction goes the wrong way, you can have a punch-up. So it's not a nice thing necessarily. But also people are not abstract citizens. It's a kind of like one-on-one, because the law is not there. It's a one-on-one, it's a much more libidinal, if you like, relation. It's a much more concrete relation between people. It's what Simmel refers to as dyadic relation. So this kind of one-on-one is a kind of like, I can hurt you and you can hurt me. Nietzsche actually thinks that it is a superior mode of community. He kind of like reckons that, what kind of community is this? The community of people who can't hurt each other. So I can't hurt you and you can't hurt me, and we say, oh, wow, we live together, it's amazing. For Nietzsche, this is kind of like, it's a bit of a joke. It's nothing like when you say, I can hurt you and you can hurt me, and we are living together. This is a kind of like, in his mind, a superior mode of being. But there is no doubt that in the anthropological literature on gift-based societies, this is a crucial element. That is, when you are doing interaction between two parties, you maintain your capacity for violence, they maintain their capacity for violence, you make an offer, they make an offer. So peace is not predicated on a third party like the law, sort of like pacifying. Peace on predicated is on knowing how to engage. But let me be clear, negotiated being is not just like gift-based societies, because gift-based societies can also have rules of gifts, rules of gift exchange, knowing when to say, knowing when to offer something, knowing when to receive something, etc. Negotiated being involves a little bit more a mode of living with uncertainty. I don't do this anymore because I've had a really bad bike accident, but I used to jog everywhere in the world. And one of the interesting things, jogging in parks, whether it's Central Park or Jardin de Luxembourg or Sydney Park, is knowing whether people want to be greeted or not when you are jogging. Sort of like you're jogging and someone passes you. Do you say, hello, do you make an offer of a greeting? Because in some places, you know that, yeah, sure, you greet and you'll be greeted back. That is how it is. But in some places, you don't know. And it's uncertain. And sometimes you pass someone and you kind of like wondering, should I say hello or not? Because maybe they think, hello, why are you bothering me? I'm jogging in the morning. I don't want to be bothered by people saying hello to me. This is how it is. It's kind of like, you're attacking me by saying hello. But in some places, you're about to say hello, and the other will say hello quickly because they're waiting for a sign for the interaction to happen. So negotiated being is of this order. That is, you have to slow yourself in and you take risks. You take risks because it's never totally known what is needed. You kind of like do it slowly. Very crucial for understanding sort of like a negotiated being. Negotiated being does not involve a kind of like structured management of otherness. The law manages relations with otherness. It can say, according to the law, you should do this. According to the law, you should be not racist. This is the mode of managing otherness. here in negotiated being, there's no law which says anything. Sort of like you just have to take it as it comes. Now, let's be clear. I don't want to give you any sense that I'm trying to say negotiated being is wonderful, not negotiated being is bad. There's all kinds of possibilities open in both. But negotiated being, you know, I kind of like work with migrants who sort of like, when they go to Australia, they say to me, it's just so wonderful that there is the rule of law. Because, you know, unlike in Lebanon, I don't need to have some sort of like my cousin working in order for me to get this or get that. You know, the law says I have the right for this, I get it. It's wonderful to be under the rule of law. By the same token, they can say to me, God, you know, sort of like, I got booked by this policeman for speeding, and I just can't believe it. You can't talk to these people. It's just like being booked by a camera. And here, they're actually mourning the fact that there's no negotiated being, that the policeman is just applying the law. And people say, oh, I find it so horrific that you can't chit-chat your way sort of like with the traffic police, etc. So people have contradictory desires in terms of negotiated being with the law and being without the law. But also these contradictory desires reflect, I think, that each space offers certain possibilities and does not offer other possibilities. And that's kind of like how we can think this. Okay, so one of the key issues of trying to think this kind of negotiated being and how it comes out today has to do with not just the opposition between being in the law and outside the law, but a negotiated being as a mode of being that is minor to the dominant mode of being in modernity, which we shall refer to it sort of like as a mode of domestication, domesticating otherness. Whether we are talking about our relationship to the environment, or whether we are talking about our relationship to other human beings, domestication is a mode in which we kind of give primacy to our needs, and we exist in the world by organizing the world according to our needs. Domestication has its roots in domus, which means to be at home, but also in dominus, which is to dominate. And in a way, domestication is then the mode of being at home through dominating others, through managing others, through positioning others. I put this here, I feel at home if I have the power to put this here, put that here. I kind of like domestication also, as we all know, sort of like involved making sure that others do not constitute a threat to me. This is very crucial. A mode by domestication means all forms of otherness should not be considered a threat to me. I do not live with otherness that constitutes a threat to me. This mode of control, this mode of domination is perhaps where today we find ourselves in need to loosen up the way it straitjackets our thinking. Domestication is behind, if you like, many dominant forms of domination that exist in the world. So you can see patriarchy as a form of domestication. You can see racism as a form of domestication. You can see the classical mode, and obviously that's where we associate it most. It is a mode of relating to nature. By domestication, it means by domesticating nature, we make nature an object that exists for us. I feel at home to the extent that I can make nature existing for me. In patriarchy, males say, I feel at home to the extent that I can control, pacify women, make them serve me. I feel it's quite an interesting sort of like thing in terms of thinking domination as domestication, because it highlights the way certain forms of being at home in the world, which means feeling groovy, feeling nice, etc., is predicated on violence and domination. I only feel at home if I can dominate my environment. And so homeliness and domination become more. And it can be reasonably argued that today the ecological crisis is a crisis of domestication. It is a crisis of this mode of believing that we can go on making nature as our object, extract from it, etc., forever. It's a crisis, the crisis of, notice, sort of like there's these forms of domination always come in crisis when they no longer serve us to extract homeliness. So if feminism can be seen as a mode of ruling the homeliness of the patriarchal homeliness of men, because there's a challenge to the way we think men think their homeliness in patriarchy. Sort of like movement by racialized people to free themselves can also be considered as a challenge to white homeliness, white colonial homeliness. How dare you oppose me? You're ruining my beautiful home. Colonists always like the colonized to be pacified so they can extract from them and pacify them. As soon as they sort of like resist, they consider as, they don't say, oh no, they're kind of like pursuing their right or something. They say, they're ruining my homeliness. So I was feeling so fine, and look at them. They've destroyed my peaceful existence. It's as if, because peaceful existence is predicated on violence, it becomes sort of like hidden, and the only violence becomes the violence of those trying to resist this kind of homeliness. Now, in the face of the crisis of domestication, in the face of the crisis of, especially in relation to the domestication of nature, but also to colonial domestication and patriarchal domestication, all of them are in crisis today, we can say, because all of them are being in the process of challenge, sort of like others who used to be the object of management are refusing to be managed. Others who were supposed to not be threatening are threatening. So one instinct in the face of the emergence of the threatening other is to say, oh no, this is a failure of domestication. I need to domesticate even more. I need to pacify even more. I need to thump the other even more so I can regain my peaceful homeliness by totally obliterating the other. It seems to me this is where negotiated being comes as an interesting way to think a different way out of this crisis of domestication. In the sense that the very essence of negotiated being is precisely this capacity of living with the threat of the other, without thinking that the primary aim or the only possible way in which I can coexist with the other is to pacify them. I cannot live with the uncertainty that the other can hurt me. Therefore, I have to ensure, either by the law or myself, by pacifying the other. Rather, we could say that we are entering an era where the capacity of this grand-scale domination is decreasing, and we are more and more in need of negotiated modes of existence. This is not a kind of wild peace hippie imaginary, you know, sort of like peace as obtained through subjugation to state and law is a very small part of our history. You know, we have existed, human societies have existed in all kinds of peaceful forms before the existence of the state and the imposition of monolegal frameworks on people. So it is not far-fetched to say, well, maybe we are facing today a situation where there are many places which need less and less some imposition of the law of the state and more a kind of like encouragement of a negotiated mode of existence, which allows to live with the uncertainty of the other. So I'm going to concentrate to finish with on the importance of thinking negotiated being in relation to the ecological crisis. And think about how it brings forth the necessity of alternative modes of thinking our relationality, but also trying to highlight that this is not an exercise in imagining things that don't exist. So sort of like, I mean, that's fine if people like to imagine things that don't exist, that's great, but I mean, I'm an anthropologist, I like to investigate things that exist and possibilities that exist. So what I'm highlighting is what the anthropological tradition has highlighted as forms of life that have always existed. And so in terms of these forms of life, the first thing that we need to kind of like highlight is that throughout history, there has been societies where domestication was not the only and not necessarily the dominant form in which people relate to nature. Many anthropological works with indigenous people have highlighted these alternative ways of existing with natural others. The essence of domestication, by the way, is always has been a certain mode of polarizing difference. You know, it's not that there is no difference between me and the tree. It's more that domestication makes human nature a polarity rather than minor differences. The same can be said of sexist modes of thinking within patriarchy, where some difference between male and female becomes perceived as a polarity. This idea of the polarization of difference. Likewise, racism. Racist thought involves polarization of difference. It's never the fact that there are no differences. It's just this idea of the difference is taken and made into sort of like different polarity. If I am a human, I should not be an animal. I should de-animalize myself, so to speak. I work on myself to take out or hide any animal aspect of me, because it's no longer that the human and me and my dog are different. It means me and is one way here, and the dog is somewhere else, a polarity. This polarization of difference is crucial for domesticating logic. And as I kind of like said, the most crucial, if you like, element of domestication is that we can say that in domestication, the other objects exist for me. I strive to make things exist for me, This notion of existing for me, everything exists. I'm trying hard to make things exist for me. The crisis is that I'm no longer succeeding, right? So, but the struggle is the struggle to make things exist for me. They're here for me, whether they're spatial, the way they're spatially located, sort of like the type of things that I put close to me, the type of things that I keep away from me, all are predicated on objects exist for me. Now, a crucial mode that anthropology has highlighted in what I have already referred to as the study of the gift is a particular type of relation where things don't exist for me, but rather exist with me. It's an interesting difference. Sort of like thinking of someone as not a problematic of how do I manage them in order to position them somewhere, but rather think how do I exist with them. And gift exchange societies where gift exchange was dominant, were always societies in which this existence with the other takes primacy over making the other exist for you. It's a different relationality. This mode extends to nature. You know, you have to kind of like think a little bit giftedness, not just simply as bringing a gift, as in bringing a present, but also some, and that requires, I mean, I don't have the time, and unfortunately, this lecture to go through the complexity of this, but let me say it's part of the essence of gift exchange is the idea that presence is gift. I'll give you a sense of it, kind of like a banal sense. I live sort of like in my house. There's a tree, and I could say, okay, a winter is coming, and I want to cut this tree because I need the wood for my fuel stove, and I'd better cut it now so it dries. This would be a relation of domestication. I'm looking at the tree and saying, the tree exists for me, and I'm going to manage it, do something, extract from it its woodenness in order to use it to produce heat. Now, there is also a sense in which I can get up in the morning, look at this tree and say, thank you, tree, for existing. That is, I can relate to the tree as something that has been gifted, you know. I mean, I think a lot of religious thought encourages us to see things in, at least religious thought in its pure theological form, encourages us to see the world as gifted to us, you know. So it's crucial to differentiate between, for instance, it doesn't have to be a tree that bears a fruit, because we can say this tree bears a fruit and gives me the gift of fruit, but the tree in itself is the gift that I am relating to in a gifted manner. This, by the way, extends to our relation to humans. We like to think that, just to give you a quick example, I had long ago this debate with a psychologist who was arguing that that parents, by offering their children gifts, and the children cannot reciprocate because they can't give their parents back anything, it actually made their children indebted and creates a certain form of resentment that comes with people who are receiving gifts and cannot give back. And I was sort of like a young father at the time when I saw it, and I kind of like, perhaps in a kind of like idealistic mood, but I think it has remained, even that my children now are in their 30s. But I said, well, look, I mean, when I give my child the gift, I actually always feel that I'm giving back. I'm not starting the process of giving, because I feel that their mere presence is a gift. Say, wow, look what I have here, a child, what a gift. And so this is what I mean by the gift of presence. I mean, well, you know, you only have to watch, be sitting in a large room and see a toddler walking into a room, and everyone goes, ah, they don't say, what are you carrying? And they say, wow, it's amazing. It's sort of like your presence is a gift. So this idea of presence as gift is something that the analysis of gift societies in anthropology has encouraged us to think. Now, you know, this kind is still maintained, by the way, in certain forms of greeting in certain rural societies. You know, in Lebanon, you know, like when you see someone, you say, oh, hello, how are you? It's sort of like a kind of like, wow, I can't believe I'm seeing you. The sun is shining, and it's just bloody amazing that you exist. As opposed to a very kind of like curt, kind of like acknowledgement which exists in different societies. So anyway, I hope I conveyed this idea that presence as gift. The tree is a gift. I can highlight the idea that thank you, tree, for existing. So that's what we call reciprocal modes of existence, gift. As opposed to domesticating modes of existence, we highlight reciprocal modes of existence. Things exist as gift to each other by their mere presence. And there is also a third mode of existence that anthropology has brought to the fore through its investigation of other forms of modes of existence. And it's a form that we call mutualism. This is quite different, again, from either domestication or reciprocal mode of existence, because in mutualism, if I want to put it in a kind of like formulaic way, I say in domestication, the object exists for me. In reciprocal mode of existence, gift-based society, the object exists with me. But in mutualism, the object exists in me. Now, the idea of things existing in you is probably the most radical for us to imagine in our societies. It comes from a long tradition the idea that objects outside of me participate in my being. There is the life that pumps into me, if you like, is not, I don't exist as a silo where life is contained in me. Things around me that have life participate in my own life. You know, I have a really facile way of exemplifying this, sort of like I often use with my students, sort of like, is that basically, you know, I always find it fascinating, but I don't know why people think it's so banal, because it is fascinating. When I take my dogs to the park and they're bouncing, I feel that I'm bouncing. And I always think, well, this communication of bounciness is quite incredible, really. Here, the dogs are not existing for me or with me, they're existing in me. That is, their mode of life is participating in my mode of life. So to go back to the tree, I could say also that I have a kind of like mutualist relation with the tree. That is, I don't think I would be exaggerating to say many of us would experience a form of looking at nature, looking at the tree, looking at the flowers, etc., and feeling they're pumping life into us, that there is something more than living life in silos that exists in this universe. Now, where does all this take us to as far as negotiated being? I would like to simply finish by suggesting that negotiated being allows us to access these alternative modes of existence. And because domestication is the most on the side of the law, so to speak, form of existence. There is a certain affinity between capitalism and domestication, capitalist exploitation, exploitation of otherness, nature. There's a kind of like affinity between all forms of mono-legalism, mono-nationalism, monogamy, monotheism, all kinds of monos sort of like come together and create systems that straitjacket you. And there is a way in which we can say this unraveling that we are witnessing today of the crisis, the ecological crisis, the crisis that comes from sort of like unruly, all kind of unruly forms of previously subjugated beings, sort of like offer us the space where we think, okay, we can draw. Negotiated being means I can draw on. I have to negotiate an existence with wild animals without pacifying them. That would be a nice thing, rather than thinking that, for instance, I have to pacify, I have to pacify them, I have to cage, I have to, how do I exist with this? What is crucial, and that's my end point, is that, you know, in the example of the tree I gave, there is no exclusive one-way relation to the tree. It's not that either I relate to the tree domestication as a domesticator and I want to cut it and use it, or I relate to it as a reciprocal mode of existence, or I relate to it in your life, pumps life into me in a mutualist way. The fact of the matter is that these three modes of existence are continuously entangled and coexist in our life. But there are certainly certain social circumstances which make some forms of relation dominate over others and eclipse others, sometimes in the name of need, sometimes, etc. So I don't think one has to advocate a society where you don't need to cut trees, but you can advocate for a society where a sensitivity to reciprocal mode of being and mutualist mode of being restricts the ease with which you cut trees. A sense that things don't exist for you, the sense that you have to negotiate your existence. The urge not to always let your own being dominate space, but rather learn how to not necessarily dominate all the time. I think one of the key elements of future survival in the face of ecological crisis is precisely learning how not to dominate. One anthropologist calls it how to survive the ecological crisis, because they feel that if we say how we're going to survive the ecological crisis, the theory still assumes an imaginary of domination, while survive involves the notion of us needing to learn how to avoid, how to go under, how not to necessarily always come on top, how to duck, etc. That is how to negotiate in our everyday life. Okay, thank you.